one of the things that happened in that meeting with Adam Newman and his wife was one of the things she said in the meeting was she said, what kind of a name is Meetup? Meetup is such a terrible name. Why would you have Meetup as the name of a company? You should change the name of the company. Work that is most satisfying and most meaningful for them. And if you're doing something and you don't have that passion, it's time to get out and do something else. I believe very deeply in servant leadership. And then when there are layoffs, it's important to be as generous and thoughtful and empathetic as one possibly can. Be very thoughtful about trying to find a path towards someone reaching out to you, as opposed to you going begging and borrowing and trying to reach out to them.
Hello. Today I'm happy to host one of the brightest persons I've met in my life, David Siegel. Maybe you know him. He's a former CEO of Investopedia, and he is a former CEO of Meetup. Everybody knows Meetup. And today he is a free man, and he's the author of Decide and Conquer book. Amazing book. I really suggest to read it. A lot of life hacks. And he is a professor of Columbia University, strategy advisor, and I'm jealous of people getting his advisement. So, David, welcome.
It's great to be here. What a wonderful overview. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, David. Really happy to see you and to have you in my podcast. And I would like to start from some funny story. I know you had a lot of funny stories from your time in Meetup. So could you share some?
Sure. Okay, I'll share one. If you want me to share another one, I'm happy to do it. We'll start off with a story. My first day as the CEO of Meetup. You know, most people don't think about this, but people are oftentimes nervous their first day going to work. And because who are they going to meet, who they get to know. But for me, I took over a company with 250 employees, a company that had been around for 16 years. I was CEO of Meetup for about 5 years until I sold the company about a month ago, hence why I'm a free person right now. And I'm thinking back to that first day when I came into the office and they said, welcome to your first day. You're now going to talk to 250 people that you never met before so that they can all judge you and have a really important first impression of you. Congrats. I was like, okay. So that first day, I remember what I did is I shared a number of things that were important to me in being a leader. The fact that emotional intelligence is, for example, more important than IQ, that people that have high EQ end up succeeding more than people with IQ, or the importance of transparency from a management perspective. But the story I'll tell is that Meetup was really losing a tremendous amount of money. They were losing close to $15 to $20 million a year.
Wow.
And then I got up in front of everyone and I said, another thing that's really important, every time I said something about transparency, I was like, yeah. Talking about the Meetup's mission, I was like, yeah. And then when I said, and what's really important is driving revenue and profit, total silence. We were just like, what? Financial stuff, that's not important. And I was like, whoa, I have my work cut out for me. Because I think the way that Meetup's culture was and the way the company was ran was literally directly as a nonprofit. It was a public good to help people find community. And that's really important. But it's not a sustainable business model because we were losing tremendous amounts of money. And I think it was an awakening moment for me of realizing just day one, I have a lot to change in the culture of this company in order to enable it to be able to be on its own and actually be a sustainable, profitable business. And sometimes that meant making a significant number of changes to people, executive teams and others. But it was a big awakening moment when everyone was clapping for everything else. But once I mentioned growing revenue and profit, people were like, "Boo, we hate revenue and profit." So that's kind of one little story that I thought I would start.
Wow, amazing. I also remember You said the story about your meeting with Newman.
Oh, sure. So Adam Newman is the founder of WeWork, and WeWork acquired Meetup about 9 months prior to them hiring me. The reason behind WeWork's acquisition of Meetup was what WeWork said is, hey, we want to build community in all of our buildings. We want all of our buildings, all of our workers to feel that work independently, to feel like there's a greater sense of events and community feel. And there's no better company than Meetup to be able to create that type of community feeling. So when I was brought in, I had an early meeting with Adam. And one of the interesting things that happened is I ended up meeting both with Adam and also with his wife, Rebecca Newman. And that's not so common because usually people don't involve their significant others, but I didn't realize that his wife was actually at the time also the chief brand officer of Meetup, which there's a lot of interesting stories if you want to watch a Hulu special or Apple TV show about WeWork, you hear about that. But one of the things that happened in that meeting with Adam Newman and his wife was one of the things she said in the meeting was she said, what kind of a name is Meetup? Meetup is such a terrible name. Why would you have Meetup as the name of a company? You should change the name of the company. And I was like, the brand has been around for 16 years, but it was kind of an example where sometimes people have very strong opinions and think that they know more about a business when they haven't even heard of the business. And that was one of my introductions to kind of the WeWork decision-making process, which is essentially, having very strong opinions about things like the name of the company and the brand without really understanding the business.
Wow, amazing story. This is your book. And please take a look how many stickers, red stickers I have. And this is all about, I can share with you how I read book. I read one book in a week, mostly about business and business development. And I can tell you, I never put so many red stickers. And red stickers, for me, it means life hacks, business hacks. So something I can take away and apply immediately. So I read it, I apply immediately, I write about it, I think about algorithm, how to apply it.
Yeah.
It's I don't know what to do with so many. So I have a lot of work ahead.
I'll tell you, Leah, I just bought a used book of mine online and it got delivered to me. And there was underlines all over it and circles and markings all over it. And it made me so happy. I should want to hold on to it. Just seeing how much the person having used. Now, granted, they resold the book, but at the very least, they were very engaged in it. So I love when I see people like you that have so much items that you found that resonated for you.
I also developed my methodology how to do it. So red stick about life hack, and green stick is about some information. I can think about it laterly. Also something what I take away from the book. And another two type of stickers, yellow stickers, it's like, it's like fat. So it's something that funny, like your story. It's a yellow sticker that I can just borrow and tell other people during my keynotes. And the last color, you can choose. It's all about some quotes. So you give some quotes from some books, from some people. I take this and use in my keynotes as well. But in this case, I have a lot of greens. Think about, and I have a lot of red. Amazing.
I love it. I'm so happy to hear. Please,
so
what's one thing you'd like me to talk about? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit more serious. How important is passion in being a successful CEO?
Yeah.
And you are a very passionate guy, I see.
I am. I am. I wake up in the morning and some people are a little slow. I wake up with my feet on and jump up in the air another day. And I don't drink any coffee, I may add, because I'm already a little bit too energetic. In fact, my employees would say to me, David, did you drink coffee this morning? You were more energetic than normal. I'm like, no, avoid all coffee.
Yeah, I understand. You can get out of your skin if you drink coffee.
Yeah, I'm already got too much caffeine.
Yeah.
So I really do think that you spend a majority of your time working, that you're not sleeping. And it's extremely important for someone to love their job. If you love your job, you'll do a better job at it. Simply put, you will do a better job if you love what you're doing than if you don't. And if you're really passionate about it, then that passion is going to be obvious to others. And I think if you're a CEO of a company, but even if you're just a manager, and if you're not even a manager, you're just a regular employee, and you don't have, doesn't mean you don't have hard days, doesn't mean there's not difficulty, but if you don't have passion for the mission of the business or passion for how much you're learning and growing as an individual and in your career, you got to find another job, because every person was put on this earth to find the work that is most satisfying and most meaningful for them. And if you're doing something and you don't have that passion, it's time to get out and do something else. So I would say it's critical, but it's even more critical for a CEO, because if you're leading a group of people and you don't believe in what you're doing, other people aren't going to believe it either. And if you believe, for example, Meetup's mission is to end the loneliness epidemic. And because I know so many people, including family members, that are regularly feel lonely, and friends, and they don't have people to connect with. And the result of that is depression and anxiety, and God forbid, any kind of self-harm. I'm so passionate about what Meetup has done that for the 5+ years that I was there until we sold it a month and a half ago, I was really considered myself so lucky and cherished every day.
Yeah,
It's very, very, very critical.
Yeah. So maybe it's important to share with my audience that actually Meetup was sold again. And David did it. And now he is a free guy.
I'm free, but I'm spending a lot of time working somehow on a lot of different other endeavors and just helping out as many different founders as I can. That's me.
Amazing. So what is your leadership style, and what kind of leadership style really resonates with you?
Yeah. So I believe very deeply in servant leadership. So servant leadership essentially means what's called, like, think about an organizational chart where the CEO is typically on the top of it, and then the executives are right underneath the CEO. I believe in a flipped organizational chart. The CEO is on the bottom. My job is to support and make sure that everyone on my team is as successful as possible. And each of the people on my team, their job, the CFO's job, is to support and make sure that everyone in their team is successful. Marketing, same thing. And if every person sees themselves as, how can I support and enable you who work for me to be massively successful, eliminate red tape, eliminate processes that are a waste of time, provide financial incentives, ask questions that might be difficult, debate, etc., then the company will succeed. So I really do believe in the concept of servant leadership is number one. The second thing, big leadership philosophy of mine, is just radical transparency, sharing everything, whether it's difficult to share or whether it's, maybe painful for someone to hear, but being as open and honest. So for example, when I first started Meetup, no one knew, we were referring to the financials earlier, no one knew that company was even losing money. No one knew the financials. Well, every month.
Like a startup, by the way. People in startups, they don't care about profit as well.
But people, I agree with that. Maybe in a startup, you don't care about profit, but you should always give visibility into what the burn rate is, for example. What is the burn rate for a startup? And make sure employees understand that. And because the worst thing you could do as a leader is surprising people. And the great way to surprise people is not to be as transparent as possible about different challenges. One of the principles I talked about in the book, as I'm sure you remember, is only be surprised about being surprised. Meaning, you should aim not to surprise people, but if you are surprised, then that's a challenge, and there's ways in which you should not surprise others. So that's a little bit of my philosophy about transparency, not surprising people, and really being a servant leader.
Yeah, I have an interesting story about it, surprising. One of investors of one of my companies, he's a billionaire, and he told me once, never surprise me. This is your job. Don't surprise me.
I love it. My board says the same thing. My board would way rather always hear something negative than being surprised. So just be open, and people, because ultimately when you surprise people and when you're not open, you don't have trust. And I talked about this in the book quite a bit, but the importance of trust is foundational to every relationship, whether it's a parent-child relationship, whether it's a spouse relationship, or as a CEO to employees, a manager relationship. The foundation of everything is trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything. So we need to build trust.
Right. So I know you are a man of value and principles. So how do you uphold your decision-making principles in the face of any adversity? Because in this case, you should surprise people. So how you manage this?
Right. So for example, when we were most recently looking to sell Meetup, most CEOs and companies would not keep their entire company almost every week updated about the sales process. It's dangerous sometimes to share too much information because confidentiality is important. But frankly, I think it's more dangerous not to. So during this most recent sales process, we every month or every couple of weeks, we had an all hands meeting with all employees, and we told them where we are with the sale process. What's the likelihood of it happening? What are some challenges? We didn't share the name of the company that we were talking to because that you can't do. But we shared almost everything but that. I think people don't appreciate that you could share a lot more than people are comfortable sharing. So, for example, if the company's not doing well, you don't stand up in front of everyone and say there could be layoffs in 6 months, there could be layoffs in 3 months. That would just create lots of anxiety and fear and stress. That's not productive. But what is productive is to say, we're missing our revenue targets. We're missing our profit targets. We need to ask you to be as cost effective as possible right now. People understand that. And then if there happens to be layoffs for whatever reason, and that's happened numerous times, it doesn't come out of nowhere. People have heard that concept is happening. And then when there are layoffs, it's important to be as generous and thoughtful and empathetic as one possibly can. So, for example, we had layoffs at Meetup in the early days. I brought a search firm in and another company in to interview all people laid off so that they would have opportunities for jobs. Be overly generous when it comes to severance packages for people. Find ways in which you could put human back into work. And even if you have to deliver bad news, find ways to mitigate it with as much empathy as you can.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I know that any corporation just suffer from some, I call it human resources entropy growth.
Yes.
So how you manage this growth? How you keep this entropy just in shape? And your main key consideration about hiring new people?
Sure. Culture is extremely important, and it's amazing to me how one or two toxic people in a culture can really bring down an organization. And if those toxic people or difficult people are in management positions or in leadership positions, then it's even more dangerous in terms of the effect on the company's culture. So in terms of hiring people, culture fit is extremely important. The problem is that culture fit can be something that's subjective and open to different people's opinion about whether or not someone's a fit or not a fit. So therefore, what I think it's important for all organizations to do, and we were really strong about this, is having a set of values in a company that are anchors and that are critical for the company that you're going to make decisions about in terms of hiring people, in terms of promoting people, and those in terms of your performance reviews with people, etc. We had a number of core values in the company. So, for example, one of them was invite change. That was a core value in the business, meaning if you can't handle change, Meetup might not be the right place for you. Another one was trust and transparency, which we just spoke to. The important of being transparent in our interactions in order to build trust. Another one is around integrity. So what we did is we really surrounded and used our values as a basis for hiring. And that way we went from subjectively just thinking, do I like this person or not like this person? Does this person have skills or not? To objectively saying, how is this person relative to the values that we're trying to build in terms of the culture of the company. And that tended to work out really well in terms of bringing in people that were very, what we'd call meetup-y. And that really helped to build the culture. So it's a very important part of our hiring process.
Yeah, it's really, very important. And my another question is about, from my experience like CEO, it was really when some new investors start to come into the board, everybody has some different bias, different opinion. And so how to manage all these? It's because, if
a lot of founders deal with this problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem because if you are not going along with your board, with your investor, you can lose them or you can lose your company. But if you're going along with them, usually it's a recipe to close your company, because usually they don't understand exactly the business and they try to influence. So how to manage all this process?
Yeah. Okay. So much to say around this one. And I think every entrepreneur who's listening to this understands and has had similar issues with this. So step one is really making sure you have the right people on the board in the first place. Okay. Oftentimes people will just put on the board and just kick the can down and say, I'll worry about it later. Whoever's giving them the most money, whoever is insisting on being on the board. And I get that. But there are difficult personalities. And there's also personalities of people who know how to listen, know how to support. And there's other personalities, people that are just like, they just state their opinion in the absence of facts. And a lot of board members, especially from venture capital firms, tend to say, well, at XYZ company, we did this, so you should do the same thing. It's ridiculous. And it's very frustrating to a lot of CEOs when they hear those things, because they're two totally different companies and two totally different situations. And people like to draw parallels. A lot of board members do it very quickly. There's a lot of ego, frankly, by board members that needs to be managed. So step one is make sure you have the right people on the board in the first place. Because if you have the wrong people on the board, it's very hard to extricate people from the board. So that's step one. Get the right people on board. Step two, let's say you don't have the right people and you have some of the wrong people. Step two is actually be comfortable working with your chairman to have some people not be on the board, because the role of the chairman is to support and enable the success and drive alignment with the CEO. Who you choose as your chairman is extremely important. And if the chairman does not help to deal with different problematic people on the board, the chairman doesn't help or even creates problems themselves, then we got a real big problem. But use the chairman to help in terms of board challenges and dynamics between people. That's number two. Number three is be comfortable being an island. What I mean by that is be comfortable having a difference of opinion than the board and saying, this is what I'm going to do. There were board members that wanted Meetup to go all virtual during the pandemic, for example. And I said, I understand why you're saying that. We are not going to do that. At the end of the day, you're the operator. You're the person in charge, the entrepreneur or the CEO. You're going to be the most impacted by any negative decisions. And you can't just do what the board wants you to do. And it's a weak CEO that oftentimes says things like, well, the board is telling us to do that. Well, you're probably going to fail.
I agree. And I saw a lot of examples of failure because of the board.
100%.
Yeah. So another question is what I really I was interested when was reading your book is how you consider the pivot. Pivot, I think everybody is interested how to do it, because usually, for example, I'm founder. I raised money. I promised something again to the board, and it didn't work well. I have to make pivot. How can I do it? What kind of fundamental principles behind it? How I present it to the board? How I start thinking about it.
I love it. It's such an important question. I think the example that I would give, that's the best example of pivoting, and I'll give it some principles, is when Meetup was an all-in-person company. Every single event happened pretty much in person. We had turned down millions of dollars of revenue by groups that wanted to meet online. And suddenly COVID hit. And we couldn't be in person anymore. And we had to pivot the business. We had to move the business from in-person only to allowing for online events. And I remember meeting with a number of Meetup employees that have been around for a long time. And they said, David, we're all about in-person. We're all about IRL, which stands for in real life. I said, no, we're all about connecting. We're not all about in-person. And the best way to connect right now is virtual, and that's what we're going to do. And we had to really pivot the business away from just purely in-person to online in terms of principles that are really important that got us through that pivot. Is number one, I don't believe you should pivot your mission. Meaning our mission was always about connecting with people. You could pivot your strategy and your tactics of how you accomplish your mission. So be comfortable with that, but don't pivot necessarily what your mission is. Figure out what your mission is. And if you have to pivot your mission, you probably need to change probably need to shut down the company, frankly. But unless you're in super early stages. But once a company's been around, figure out how to accomplish that mission in a different way, pivot that, not something totally different as a model. That's number one. The second principle I would give in terms of pivoting is the importance of learning fast. You got to get your MVP out. You got to get your minimum viable product out. As soon as COVID hit, within 3 days, we hacked something together. We enabled people to have virtual events. And then we learned that we made this mistake, we made that mistake. And I really do believe that a lean startup, build, measure, learn, make mistakes, fail quickly. But I think in pivoting, don't look for perfection. It's enemy of the good, right? But instead, make sure to figure out how to pivot by getting something out to market very, very quickly. That's the second component of pivot. And third component of pivoting is to understand that most organizations and businesses are not simple. Then I can't just change one thing and everything changes. But there's a whole ecosystem that surrounds making one change here, you need to change something else there. So for example, at Meetup, by going online, it wasn't just going online. We needed to spend time with all of our organizers to train them on how to make successful online events. We needed to change the technology and product experience and design experience of our business to enable that. We needed to set up our databases in different. There was a whole bunch of different things we needed to do to share best practices when you're pivoting a business, and understand that the way to enable a pivot to succeed is not simple. You just surround the pivot with a whole lot of other things, whether it's content, whether it's a new marketing plan or new advertising, etc., for the pivot to ultimately succeed.
Oh, it's very interesting. Pivot is something, environmental. What about problem of the company itself? And they have to pivot because they failed in something. And this is a little bit different story. So,
So for startups that I've been advising, when you fail in something, one of the common actions that a startup will do is there's something called recency bias. What recency bias is that you have a previous experience that was, let's say, a negative one, and therefore you oftentimes then go to the exact opposite extreme in trying to implement something else. And I think when sometimes a rollout fails, I've seen startups go from point A to point Z and do the exact opposite in some way, and then that fails because it's too extreme. They go from one extreme to another extreme. Oh, we're going to be only a sales-driven organization. That didn't work. Now we're going to eliminate sales completely and just go to no sales and just marketing-driven organization. Or we have a marketing campaign and it was a not successful brand marketing campaign. Let's eliminate that completely. And now let's go to only performance marketing. Whatever the thing happens, people go too extreme when something fails. And what I would say to the founder is, I would say, okay, I understand fail. There could be a reason why you implemented this in the first place. You may not have implemented it in the right way. Don't go so extreme in the action that you're about to take in terms of the new thing you're going to do. Find some kind of a middle ground. Find some way to learn from what you just did, to make a revision to it to see whether it can succeed before you just throw the whole thing out and do something completely different. I think people like to jump around too much. Yeah. And there's a concept of like slow is fast and fast is slow. Sometimes you try to go too fast and then you end up like just, after 2 years, starting from ground zero. And that's not very healthy.
Yeah, so get to the ground remove bias and start from this. Yeah, it's a very, very, very important piece of wisdom. Thank you very much. So could you provide some maybe life hack for successful merging acquisition? Because, this is the goal of many startupists. I created my startup. I am looking for to make difference. At some point, I'm looking for how to sell my company.
Yeah.
But I get bored. I have only 5% of the company by the end, so I wanted something new. So any life hack?
Plenty of life hacks. Okay. So I can think of 2 or 3 right off the bat. So number 1 is the time to start thinking about a sale is not 3 to 6 months prior to the sale. It's 2 to 3 years before the sale. So what do I mean by that is oftentimes business development and partnership opportunities can lead to M&A opportunities. If there are companies you think can be companies that could acquire you at some point, try to build a business relationship with them now. So for example, at one point, we identified that Starbucks might be interested in acquiring us. So we built a business relationship with Starbucks. And we had some conversation with them. We built a business relationship with Match.com because they were maybe interested in Meetup from a dating perspective. So I ended up building business relationships with 5, 10, a dozen different companies that could have ended up being the companies that acquired Meetup. That didn't happen, but I would say one hack in terms of M&A is very frequently the company that ends up acquiring you knows you very well beforehand, which is actually what happened with Meetup. The company that acquired us, called Bending Spoons, had a very, very successful Meetup group for many years. Because they had such a successful Meetup group and they had hundreds of people coming to their events, and they were based in Italy, where Meetup actually was the basis for an entire political party starting up in Italy. They knew Meetup extremely well, and then they reached out to us. So that's point 1, is build relationships prior to an acquisition and good things will happen versus starting to go cold and talking to someone. Life hack number 2 is you're always in a better position when people reach out to you to acquire you than when you have to reach out to people. So we went through a process. It ended up not working out at one point about a year and a half ago, but then people started reaching out to us rather than us reaching out and you're in a much better negotiating position when others reach out to you. So you want to have as many different, get your name out there, get relationships out there, build relationships with people so that people are reaching out to you. And you can leave little hints like, oh, at some point when we decide to sell, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean you're looking to sell. And then suddenly, by leaving those little hints, people are like, oh, and it goes into people's heads, maybe I should approach them about an acquisition. So, be very thoughtful about trying to find a path towards someone reaching out to you, as opposed to you going begging and borrowing and trying to reach out to them. And last thing I would say is, for startups, you're in a terrible position when you're running out of cash. Do not try to sell when you're running out of cash. Try to sell from a position of strength when you actually have a lot of cash, not when you're running out of cash.
So in a couple of words, get oversubscribed and do everything to do it. So learn how to do it.
The better. Competition is good for increasing valuations of businesses.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming to my podcast again. This is an amazing book. I recommend to every entrepreneur, founder, and maybe corporate CEO. I don't know exactly. But for me, like entrepreneur and investor, venture partner, it was a treasure of wisdom. Thank you, David.